Wherefore we must need be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. And I think we talked a little bit about that we need to be subject because there is wrath connected to not being subject to your government. In other words, if they got laws and you break them, you're going to what? You're going to suffer the wrath of the government. And you're talking about judging people. That's what the judges do. And when the judge passes sentence on you, he's judged you. And that is the wrath of the government is placing judgment upon you for something you've done wrong. Now, the Apostle Peter tells us, though, if judgment comes, when we've done something wrong, we deserved it. Don't worry about it. Don't cry in your milk. It's too bad. You deserved your punishment. But if it comes on you, you haven't done anything wrong, you bear it because God has something really nice for you. And some kind of rewards coming your way. If we suffer with him, we shall also reign with him, you see. And your suffering in this lifetime for Christ will also equate you and accredit you something special in the kingdom. And you'll have a special reign, a special position, and so forth and so on. So never worry about this life. Don't worry about the one that can kill your body, but worry about that one that can cast your body and soul into hellfire. Ron chapter 10 and verse number 4. Daniel chapter 6 and verse number 10. Talking about Daniel when when they made the decree against him and his 3 Hebrew friends that you're not supposed to pray to any other god but the king. Darius, and of course, Darius didn't know what they were doing, but figured it out before Daniel went to the lion's den. But of course, there's nothing Darius could do because he'd already signed a decree. Once it's been sealed with the king's ring, it can't be nothing you can do. And that's why when the Bible talks about being sealed unto the day of redemption, you're sealed by God. That can't be broken. Can't be broken. The only person that can open that seal is who it's going to. So it won't be open till you get to heaven, my friend. And so when you're whoever you've been signed to, and that's the way it is. So the Lord Jesus Christ will open that seal when you get there. And you're sealed unto the end. You're in Christ. Christ is in God. And nothing's getting you out of there till you get there. Sealed unto that day. But here we find that they cast Daniel into the lion's den. But I'd like to, I think in verse number 16, it said the king commanded that they brought Daniel, and they cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. See, Daniel didn't say my God would deliver me. The king knew his God would. Daniel's done enough for that kingdom that, he had such a testimony with that king. That king knew his God is not going to let him die in that lion's den. But I can tell you, Daniel didn't know. And Daniel, basically, he would say he would be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Our God is able to deliver us, but if he don't, I got news for you, old king. I'm still not bowing down. That's the way Daniel was. And Daniel would say right here, my God's more than able to deliver me, king, and no disrespect. But if he doesn't, I'm still not praying to you. Still not praying to you. And that's the way we are. So when we talk about, are there times that we could go against our government? Yes, there are times, and that's when God speaks on the subject first. We found that during the pandemic. When churches were shutting down, God never told a church they're allowed to shut down. God says on the first day of the week we do what? Well, we come together to worship. On the first day of the week, we're supposed to be in church. And so God set up the church house and said, you're supposed to be here. And then we found out the government in some states, they stepped in and said, no, you can't have church on Sunday. It's too dangerous. Somebody's going to get sick. Well, somebody might get sick at home. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's no guarantee. I mean, I might have to go to the grocery store. I might have to get gas. I might get sick anywhere, and I'd rather take my chances not getting sick at church as I would at Kroger's or Walmart or the gas station or anything. Are you going to shut the whole country down? See, and you can't just pick out somebody and say, yeah, we're going to shut you down. No getting together. Well, they just shut all the companies down. Are people still going to work in those states, you know? Are they still doing all those things? Well, that was all just a gimmick to control. They wanted to see how easy it was to control Christians. And it worked in some. It was easy. But some pastors who know the scriptures pretty well, like John MacArthur and like Jack Tieber out there in California, they said, no, we're not shutting down. There's nothing in the scripture that says we have to do that or we can do that. We don't care what you do. You can throw us in jail, but we're still not shutting church down. I'll be there as long as I'm able to get there. I'll be there on Sunday, and anybody who wants to come can be here with me. And so, just like Daniel, when he said, I'm still going to pray to my God. I'm not praying to you. And I'll be praying to my God when you're long gone. But I'm not going to bow down and pray to you. And that's the way it is when it comes to worship. When it comes to serving our Lord, then we're supposed to serve him. And there's a time coming, like when the Apostle Peter says in Acts 5:29, and Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than man. See, there comes that time when Peter says, we got to obey God in this. They said, you can't preach that name. You can't spread that doctrine in our cities anymore. You can't do that. That's a no-no. We forbid it. And Peter said, I understand that. And we're not trying to be rebellious, and we're not trying to be, but no, we got to do what God said. God said, go out and preach the word and be instant in season, out of season. I mean, when it's convenient and inconvenient, we're still supposed to do it. And if we're a Christian, we're faithful, then we got to be faithful to our God. Right here in our own city, they tried to stop people from knocking on doors. Yep. My good friend, Pastor Hahn, used to be the pastor of Madeira, Madeira Baptist Church, I think it was. But, and they would go out in the community and knock on the doors, and so the community came together and said, you know what? We don't want you knocking on. We don't want no soliciting in this city. We don't want you doing that. We don't allow that here anymore. And Pastor Hahn said, no, wait a minute. God told me to go to every creature. I said, now, only way you could stop that is if you don't allow anybody to go to that house. If nobody in this town's allowed to visit anybody at any house any given time, then I won't go there either. But as long as people are allowed to visit there, then you can't stop me either. I'll be allowed to visit there too. And so they took it to court, and Pastor Hahn won. You can't stop them under the Constitution. The government has no right to stop a church from serving their God. They can't do that. They can't prohibit or they can't exalt it. In other words, they can't establish a church, nor can they stop one. So they have to stay out of it. That's what separation of church and state is. Separation of church and state is not forbidding you to do things publicly. It is to keep the government out of the church's business. That's what it's all about. It's to keep it from becoming a state-run church like it was in England. And so I know they twist it, make it. They use a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote. And in the letter it said something about separation of church and state. And that's the thing, that's the statement they used. But that's not what the Constitution says. You can't just take somebody's statement out of a letter, probably don't even understand the context of the letter, and then say, this is what he meant, this is what this means. No, that's not what it means. It means, government, please keep your nose out of God's business. Please keep your nose out of God's business. We're allowed to come together and worship because God told us to, and God takes preeminence over all. God's sovereign, and he can do what he wants. Now, they don't understand that, but Christians understand that. We understand that we obey Almighty God. And sometimes you actually have to buck your own government when it comes to those things. that when God's spoken on the subject first, and God's already told you what to do, and then they're telling you you can't, and that's what's going on around the world. So I know it's going to be here in the next 10 or 20 years. You're going to fight the same battles that they fought in England, or they fought in Italy, or they fought in France, or Spain, or any of those Spanish countries down there where the Catholic Church runs the country and they're not allowed anything else. I mean, we used to smuggle Bibles in to Mexico, and we take those Bibles in, we go up in the mountains, those little villages, and I've took a load in there, smuggled them in. We had like 1,500 Bibles. We take them up there and we pass them out to the people. We have gospel meetings, but you know, right behind us after we leave, the Catholic Church comes in, has a bonfire. The priest comes in that community, has a bonfire in the middle of the town, gathers up everybody's Bible and throws them into the bonfire and burns them because they don't want the people to learn anything. They like the control. See, we got the best the Catholic Church has to offer here in America. It's not like that in other countries. In a lot of countries, witchcraft, everything in those churches. They do whatever. And, and we think they might be spiritual. There's not much spirituality there. Matter of fact, you go back and read history. You know, I was reading the lady I was talking about last week, that Jean Marie Guyon, I think her name is. She wrote that little book about simple prayer or something like that. But I was reading about her life, and you know what the Catholic Church called her? A mystic. I didn't realize that mystics Christians were called mystics. So I thought they were talking about she was into some kind of cult. You know, when you're thinking about mystics, you're talking about people who talk to the dead and all that. Well, they think we're mystics because we talk to God and we talk to Jesus and so forth and so on. So apparently the Catholic Church, they never believed in the Trinity or anything back then. They thought it was crazy because she believed in the Trinity. And so, but you know, you don't see that in America, do you? They're Trinitarians here, the Catholic Church is. And they pray to God, somebody does. Maybe they don't think you can, just a priest maybe. And you're the mystic if you do, but it's all right if they do, that kind of thing. But yeah, they called her a mystic, and that was forbidden to be a mystic, and they called it a Christian mystic. She was a French Christian mystic. And it was against the law. She spent 8 years in prison because of it. She never did leave the Catholic Church. She went against their doctrine, and she wrote in her book, in that book it tells you that, you're saved by grace and there's nothing you can do to merit salvation, and the Catholic Church hated that. They just absolutely hated that. And they made her recant and all that kind of stuff, and she would not do it. And she spent 8 years in prison because she stood her ground. She stood her ground. Or sometimes you got to go against the authority. You got to go against the authority. You know, John Bunyan was the same way. He was in jail for what? For preaching the gospel, the truth. Catholic Church says, all you have to do is recant what you said, and we'll let you go. All you got to do is recant. No, he said, I can't do that. So when he was in prison, he wrote the book Pilgrim's Progress. He wrote that book by memory. He didn't have a Bible. Everything was right here. And if you've ever read that book, that's one of the most, you're talking about an allegory. That one, he goes to all these different steps trying to get to the Lord and get that burden off his back and all that stuff. And he runs into all these characters, all through it. I mean, it's one of the most interesting books. But there was a time in America they used 2 books in school. You know what they were? One was the King James Bible. Amen. The second was Pilgrim's Progress. That's the 2 books they taught English out of in a public school system. What we call public school system. Back then they were just community schools that were taught by the pastors usually. The pastors taught the local school. And so all the kids came to the church throughout the week. The community got together and built the church, and they would come to the church, and the pastor would teach the school. And all the kids were trained right there, and they were taught out of the King James Bible and out of Pilgrim's Progress. Do you think morals were better back then than they are today? I mean, they called each other sir and ma'am, and, you know, I went on a tour one time down in Savannah, Georgia. Anybody ever been through old Savannah? They take you on the tour and you go, isn't it pretty neat? They take you through all, and they take you to, um, one of the houses you go to is, Hamilton, I don't know, it was a vice president or something, Vice President Hamilton maybe? One of them, but anyway, we go to his house and they start explaining things to you, and they got a stairway there, you know, and back then, you know, this is way back in the 1800s, this house was built, in the mid-1800s, and it had its own air conditioning system. And they had a big water tower on top of the building, and the water ran through the pipes, and the cool air came through and across the pipes and blew the cool air into the house, and it was all done, you know, with outside draft, you know, done like that. But anyway, it's so cool when you're thinking, you know, these guys were not dummies back in their day, man. I mean, the Egyptians had inside plumbing back in those days, times of Christ and that kind of stuff. Indoor plumbing. We think that's something America's invented or something, you know. But no, they had it thousands of years ago. But we're catching up. We're catching up. But what I was going to tell you is, what was I going to tell you? Anybody know? No. Yeah. I was going to tell you that they had a stairway there, and they had a you know, where a big thing, you know, you hang your coat and hats and all that on. And it had a mirror there. Well, they said you had to turn and face the mirror when a woman would walk up the steps, so you couldn't see her ankles. Because their dresses were all the way down their ankles, you know that, right? Yeah, so you couldn't see her ankles. That's how, and they wore their dresses with long sleeves. I mean, they covered their body. Now, I'm not that extreme, people, but I do think we're losing modesty sometimes. You know, I was in Florida church. You ever been in a Florida church? Well, Nancy, I was in a Florida church on a Wednesday night when it's laid back. And the people come in right off the beach in their bikinis, and you have swimming suits, and we have watermelon, you know, after service there, and cut up a bunch of watermelons, and everybody out there. It's different, but we are losing some things, and we used to have come as you are on Wednesday too, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think you want to take it that far, you know? And could you imagine, I mean, maybe this one comes in a pretty nice, fairly decent swimsuit, maybe even with a skirt on it, you know, you might get by. But the next one says she had a swimsuit on and she's got a string, you know what I'm saying? And maybe a piece of tape hiding something, I don't know, a little tape here. I'm just saying, ladies, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, where's modesty? You know, what happened to it?
I noticed that on the boating, people walking in like that.
Yeah.
Saw some sights.
There you go. But, and I was saying all this, that they had more morals back in the day. And they had more morals because the way they were taught and how they were taught and what they were taught from. You see, it makes a difference. This country is wild because they're getting away from what? Miss Donna?
Pilgrim's Progress, is that book still around?
Yeah,
Do we get one here? I never heard of it.
probably do. But you can actually, if you want to watch this, you can go on, I'm pretty sure it's Hulu. I watched it on the other day. You got Hulu? Is it Hulu? Hulu? I don't know what it is, but we got it, whatever it is, and I think it was on that I watched it. But anyway, type it. You got Roku? Who's got Roku? You can type it in on Roku, Pilgrim's Progress, and it'll bring it up wherever it's at. But you can watch it free somewhere. Yeah, on the movie, you know, like it's like an animated thing, but it'll give you the gist of the story. So. But where were we here? Modesty. Yeah, we were back there. So anyway, things were different because they were, you know, people were raised different and things were done differently. But you'll find that this Madam Jean Guyon, she was in prison. In her book, someone asked her, you know, that did you what do you think about your God now? I mean, he let you go through this, 8 years in prison. What do you think about him now? And she just flat said, it's not my responsibility to figure out what God did or why God does what God does. It's my responsibility what I do for God. Wow. That's deep. We're always, you know what, people today, we come to church to see what God can do for us. But they used to come to church to see what they can do for God. It's like President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, when he became president, in his speech he said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? And that's the way church is. Don't ask what your church can do for you, but ask, what can I do for my church? How can I make it better? How can I become a more functional part of it? So in Acts 25, verse number 11, for if I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. So this is the Apostle Paul, and he says, listen, he's confronting the king, and he's saying, hey, if I've done something worthy of death, I'm ready. Go ahead, I'll take the punishment. But he said, if I haven't, I refuse. He said, I refuse not to die if I have. But he said, and if there be none of these things whereof they accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. So what Paul was saying, yeah, if I've done something worthy of death, go ahead and you can take my life or imprison me or whatever. But I haven't done any of those things they accuse me of. Nothing. And because I haven't, I'm going to use the system. So I'll use the law here in my favor. I'm going to, as a Roman soldier, appeal unto Caesar. So he makes his appeal unto the king himself. The main king, which is Caesar. And we can use our government. It's here for us. We're part of it. We're American citizens, and we're allowed to use the law in our favor too. And we have Christian law associations that protect, or try to, protect our rights as Christians. And they will come and fight for you. And so it's good to support one of them. You know what? I don't think we as a church support any Christian law firm, but we should. We should take David Gibbs on, the next missionary we take on. We should take Dr. David Gibbs on as support and use it so the Christian law firm will be part of our ministry, and we wouldn't feel so bad if we ever had to use them. So, well, we support you guys, come on down. They're right here in Mason. They could be here in a few minutes if we needed them. So it wouldn't be a real issue for them. Verse number 6, Romans 13:6. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon these very things. So here he tells them to pay tribute also. So tribute's just a tax, that's all. So there are taxes, there's customaries, they call them, there's you pay honoraries and different things of that nature. And he reminds us that, if you were to see verse number 7, see if I got it here. Verse number 7 gives a better example where it says, owe no man anything. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. So you can see that we're supposed to pay our taxes. We're supposed to, whatever the government requires out of us, we're supposed to do it. Now, I've seen movements in our Christian faith where they refuse to pay taxes. And I know one church in Indianapolis, and I always thought the guy was a great preacher, and I never understood his thinking, but he just believed somehow you don't have to obey the government. You're your own entity, and they have no power over you. Well, he found out real quick they do. He wouldn't have his people. He said, you don't need a marriage license. He'd marry them without a license. He'd say, you don't need a driver's license. You're part of this entity, you don't need a driver's license, and they wouldn't get a driver's license. And, I mean, it was things like that, and you don't need to pay taxes. And so, when the government did come in, they let them go for a while. When they did come in, they took everything. Took all the property, the church building, shut them down. They took everything. He went to prison. So here's the thing. You want, let's say federal income tax, for instance. Federal income tax is illegal. It was never ratified by our Congress. It was never made a law. It's illegal. But the government says you have to do it. So even though it's illegal, there's nothing under the Constitution that tells you that you can get by with not doing it. So because the government says you have to pay taxes, you pay your taxes, because if you don't, you're going to feel the wrath of who? Your government. They're going to come down on you. And I want to tell you, you're going to wind up paying your taxes, okay? Plus, they're going to take something. So just look at the celebrities. Wasn't it, what's the old guy that sings? Willie Nelson? I was going to say Neely Wilson. Yeah, they got old Willie Nelson, man. They was going to bury him. I think George Jones might have stepped in and helped him pay his taxes. There were some people who stepped in and helped him. But you can't get by with it, folks. I'm telling you. No matter how unlegal you might think it is, and it may be, and I'm not even here a lawyer, I'm not going to fight the issue. I'm just going to tell you, if the government says you pay it, you're going to pay taxes, or you're going to find the wrath of your government. So pay the taxes. And that's what God says here. God says pay it. Pay the tribute. And I'm sure they didn't have a constitution. They just had a government that says, you owe us this, and you're going to pay it. And so he says, pay it or suffer the wrath. But no, pay it. If it's required, you pay your taxes. So he says in Numbers 18:24, but the tithe of the children of Israel, which they offered as a heave offering unto the Lord, I have given to the Levites to inherit. Therefore, I have said unto them among the children of Israel, they shall have no inheritance. So because the Levites were the servants of God and served God, they didn't have an inheritance. In other words, they didn't work a legal secular job. They worked for the Lord. And the other 11 tribes paid 1/10 of all they had to the Levites, so the Levites could take care of the things of God. That was one tithe. They had 3 tithes. The next tithe was a wave tithe, or wave offering, or whatever it was, went to the government like a tax or a tribute. And it was 10%, just like the other tithe. And it was to support their government. So that's what supported their military and supported their judges and whatever else they had, their courts. And then they had another tithe that was for the poor. And that tithe was 1/10 also. And some of these might have been more than 1/10, because I figured it out one time when I was doing a study on it. It's 33% of your income went to tithing. So when you got your church, you got the poor, and you got the government. Now, we complain about our tax, but I don't know if our tax as a regular individual is going to be any higher than that. And it shouldn't be. But God would probably say, that's not too bad, folks. So we're not doing too bad, I don't think. Now, the problem is in America is everything's taxed. So I'm sure in Israel you didn't go down the street and buy something and they tax you on it, then sell it to somebody and they tax them on that, and then they come back and say, I'm going to tax you on the value of it. You got it sitting in your driveway, and then next year you want to license it, and they're going to tax you on it to license it, because you got to pay a license tax, and then you're going to get driver's license and pay a tax, and then you buy tires and you got a sales tax, then there's an excise tax, and then there's a tax to get rid of it, and then they sell you a warranty to protect it. That might as well be a tax too, because it's all, everything as added in there. And when you think about all the taxes that an individual actually pays, you're giving way more than 50% of your income. Everything's a tax. And you got property tax, sales tax, all these different, and every little thing, like when you do business with the government, like when we have a tent meeting, we have to pay like, say $500 right up front just for a permit to put the tent up. Yeah, in our own parking lot, yeah. And then we have to have these inspections like the fire department, and we have to pay for that, and we have to have these guys come down, and then whatever else. But anyway, after you get all that, and you get one from Hamilton County, then you get one from Delhi Township, and then you get one from the Delhi Township Fire Department, and by the time you get done, you got all this money tied up, and you ain't done nothing yet. It's just all taxes. But we do it because why? That's what the law requires. You give tribute to who? Custom to who? Honor to who? And so that's what we do. So in Malachi 3:10, it says, bring ye all your tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, to prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. So the promise is, even back then, the promise was that if you bring your tithes in, the Lord will bless you for it. And I believe the Lord blesses you for tithing in your church. But the Lord blesses you for paying your taxes. The Lord blesses you for all the other things that you might do. That's even outside of, your church, that you might give money toward, if those are the things that the Lord requires you to do. Now, a lot of people think tithing is only for Christians. No. When God talks about giving, he says every man. He doesn't say just Christians. He says every man should give. Every man. And that God would bless every man that gave. So God is saying that I don't just bless Christians. If you're in this and you give, and you're doing this from your heart, whether you're a Christian or not, I will bless you for it. And God does. You ever wonder why the rich just keep getting richer? They're givers. They invest in everything. And so they give a lot of money away. I know years ago I was working for this. I was taking care of some apartment buildings up there in Mount Adams. And I was working for Gould's Realtor. And he's an old Jewish fellow. He was about 83 then. And he used to come by. He was funny because, this he had a vision for the future now. He's 83 years old, okay? He's thinking about 20 years down the road. He had a Cadillac. He loved the old Cadillac convertible. He'd come and get me and he'd say, hey, Harry, you drive. I'd jump in. I'd drive the car for him. We'd drive around Mount Adams and he'd look at these properties. He said, I want to show you something. What do you think about this? And I said, man, that's a nice piece. I said, I could see, a condominium sitting there overlooking the city. And he'd say, you know what that's going to be worth 20 years from now? He just bought it. And he's telling me what it's going to be worth 20 years from now. I'm sitting there thinking, why do you care? You're not going to be here 20 years from now. Why do you care what it's going to be worth?
We might be, so.
So anyway.
He might be going to give it to you.
There you go. Well, one of them was an old church I've been in. He bought that old church and we tore it down. So I don't, I always thought, I told some of the guys, I didn't tell him, I told some of the guys I work with, I said, I'd like to have the old church right where it sits. I turned it into Church's Steakhouse, overlooking the city, and they got a big porch where you walk out. I'd have tables out there. We could sit out there and look at the riverfront and all the, how pretty it is from Mount Adams overlooking the city. I said, this would be Church's Steakhouse right here. We'd have the best church of steaks in town. But one time, I told you all this, tell you this, I think. We got him in church. The guy I actually worked for, invited him. And I'm trying to think of his name. But anyway, he came. But after church, they all walked out. He asked, he said, Alvin, what'd you think about the service? Alvin said, choir needs robes. That's all he said. Choir needs robes. And Nan, what was his name? Guy I worked for. Anyway, he said, well, Alvin, won't you buy him some? And he said, tell him to get in line. What he was saying is there's a big line waiting for me to buy stuff. So rich people, they have people there all the time wanting money. There's a line you have to get in if you want something from them. And so he was kind of funny, but I understood him. But God blesses everybody that gives. Jewish people know that more than anybody. I had a Jewish fella, he was a doctor. And I was looking for some building materials. I was rebuilding the baptistry down in Addison. And I'm building a wall. I needed some wood to trim it out and everything. Anyway, this guy had this, in the marketplace, he had, whichever marketplace it was we were looking at, but he had this material he wanted to give away to somebody. And, or he wanted to sell it cheap or something. But anyway, I went down there to see him. And I told him who we were, you know, and I said, yeah, we'll take it. We need some right now. And there's some real nice trim boards and that, you know. I can trim it out with and stuff. And he said, I'll give it to you. I said, well, thanks. You know, that's great. And he said, anyway, we got in a conversation about it. And I said, well, you know, I said, I know Jewish people. I've worked for a lot of Jewish people, you know, because I used to clean windows and stuff. And they're sticklers. I mean, people think Jews don't like to pay money. They might not, but they'll pay whatever you ask as long as you do a good job.
Yeah.
They don't want anything bummy. And if they come around and say, man, do that, redo it. Because they're serious. They come around and say, that's a great job. They'll whip that money out on you in a heartbeat, man. They'll never ask you another question. But I asked this guy, we got in a conversation. He said, you know, all Jewish people give. He said, because we believe that every Jew, I didn't know this, but he told me that. We believe every Jew has to go to hell for a certain amount of time. And he said, according on how we gave in this life is how long we have to stay there. So we give the best we can, every chance we can. I'm thinking, that sounds like Catholicism. I just like, wow, you know, never heard that before. But that took me by surprise. I never heard that before, you know. But yeah, they give, and the Lord does bless them. God blesses the giving no matter who gives it. Every man give, every man. And you give willingly and not of necessity. But you give cheerfully, of free heart. And when you do that, the Lord blesses you. He blesses you. We're going to stop right here because we're 10 minutes late, right? I was having a good time here. If we get thinking about these different stories, I've done a lot of things in my life, I think. I got stories. But I start thinking about them, they come to you, you know, when you get into it. But any discussion or anything? Anybody here haven't given enough, you're going to have to spend 100 years or so in hell? Anybody like that? Huh?
There was a nursing home used to sit over there at the corner of Phillips and Oberon.
Yeah.
And the girlfriend I was dating at the time, she went there. She got me a job going in there and open doors. It was owned by a Jewish guy, maybe 30 years old or something like that. And he paid good money, but after I was done, he'd come, he looked at them, inspected them, looked at them, inspected them. Well, he paid me. But you were right, though.
Amen.
They'll pay you good money, man, as long as you do a good job.
Right. They will. They're not bad people to work for, really.
He didn't bother me or nothing.
Yeah. They got a bad name. Like, That's why they, they think they're called Jews, because they Jew you down, but not necessarily. And the old guy ran a junkyard down there on Worcester Pike, Marion's Junkyard. If you got there on Monday morning, if you're the first customer, he believed in all his heart he had to sell no matter what. He had to sell something to the first customer. If you're the first customer, you can buy it for whatever you want to buy it for. He's going to sell, he's going to let you have it. Because he believes if he don't make that sale, his week's going to go bad. So he's got to let you have it. So my father-in-law always went down there on Monday morning, right at opening time, so he could get a deal on something, that he needed. So he's the one that taught me that. So he said, we got to be there at Marion's when they open because he knows he has to sell this. So, anyone else? Who wants to dismiss us in prayer tonight? Johnny?